Hi everyone, I'm really excited to be here this morning and talking about something that's really important, which is distribution. How do you get your product in the hands of users? And marketing has a big role to play. So I'm really excited to be on the panel with 4 amazing marketers that I'm going to invite up to take their seats. So basically we've got Matthew from Kraken, Ben, who's the CEO of Alchemy, Emily, who's the CMO of Hype, and also Indi at Blockchain, so who's a head of marketing at Blockchain. So I'll allow you to take your seats, and then we'll probably start with an intro. So
that's very cozy.
I think what would be amazing if you could all just give like a little intro on yourselves, your background, what you do, and also how big your teams are, your marketing teams as well.
Yeah. Shall I kick us off? Hi, I'm Indi. I'm the director of marketing at blockchain.com. I've been at blockchain.com for 4 years, but before that, I was really focused on fintech for B2C apps. So the biggest one of those was Monzo, which everyone loves to ask me about. But I also worked mostly in fintech startups. My team is really, really small. So I have Jess here today, who's fantastic. And then we have one other person full-time in marketing, which I think will be very different to what you're looking at.
I'm Matt, VP of Growth at Kraken, so run all of our growth team globally there. Team's about 35 or so people. Obviously, the marketing team, much bigger, probably close to 100. I've been at Kraken now for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was fully on-chain in the Web3 game studios, CMO over there, and spent, for my sins, best part of a decade in the B2B software space prior to that.
Hey everyone, my name is Emily. I'm the CMO of Hype. We're a full-service go-to-market crypto-native agency. There's about 90 of us. I've been in crypto marketing full-time for the last 3 years. Prior to that, have done a lot of performance marketing for e-commerce, SaaS. A lot of the clients we work with are ecosystems, infra, and protocols.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm CEO and co-founder of Alchemy. Alchemy is an online digital marketplace that helps big brands find their audiences and websites, apps, TVs, generate revenue for doing so. We have, I think, 8 or 9 people in our marketing team, but then we also work with a lot of big brands to help them advertise. So we kind of sit on both sides of the fence. Like we get to see what big brands do and how they implement that really well, and we can take a lot of that into what we do as a business when we're trying to raise awareness about Alchemy in general.
Amazing. Thanks so much for the intros. I actually remembered I didn't really introduce myself as well, so I'll go last. I was too excited to introduce all of you. So I'm head of platform and ecosystem at Fabric Ventures. We're very much like an OG VC in the space, Web3 native, investing across like infrastructure, DeFi, Web3 AI, social, etc. And I really run the marketing team, but also post-investment portfolios, support, partnerships, etc. So my first question today is really like, actually within the Web3 space, there's lots of different types of companies. So I'd love to dive deep in like, what are the different types of companies, pre-token, post-token, categories, etc. And should that actually dictate their marketing strategies? Who wants to take that?
I'd love to start on this one because Web3 marketing, I love diving into the nuance of Web3 just because marketing strategies absolutely differ. Even in Web2, there is consumer, there's retail, there's food and beverages, there's supplements, and so many other categories I'm missing. Specifically in Web3, infrastructure would be attracting a different audience in a consumer dApp or even a DeFi protocol. With ecosystems, it's B2B to C marketing, meaning we need to attract developers that are building apps that attract consumers. And then also with the stages, pre-token versus post-token is a completely different strategy. And I know a lot of these folks here can talk a lot about retention as well, so I'll hand it over.
Yeah, and I think like bolting on a little bit there as well, when we think about like Web3, I wouldn't necessarily say like a centralized exchange like Kraken or blockchain.com are like what I would class as Web3. And in Web3, even thinking about like what is a big brand, there's not that many big brands in Web3. In fact, probably 99.9 something% of projects in the space are still pre-product market fit, right? And it's like a lot of this is evolving and growing. So when you're thinking about growth, whether you are, like you say, Emily, like a consumer-facing app, whether you're targeting an institutional audience through on-chain tokenized assets or anything in between, like your entire go-to-market is completely different, and the way you think about growth and marketing is completely different.
Yeah, I think it's really dictated by most campaigns, like what are you actually trying to achieve, as opposed to like to some degree, there is like, who are you and what do you stand for? What's your mission? What's your values? But like, that's just like generally your brand messaging. I think then you really have to think quite hard about like, what is it that I'm trying to do? Am I trying to get more people to use my DApp? Am I trying to get people to tell people about it? Am I trying to increase TVL, increase trading volume? Whatever it is, there will then be kind of specific strategies you can use with a key core kind of KPI in mind, and then deliver a strategy against that, as opposed to, I'm this kind of company, so I think I should be doing this. Like, there'll be certain nuances to the type of people that start off in your community, and like the team at Flight 3 talk about this a lot, but like building your first 100 super fans is probably the most important thing, because they will tell other people about it and they become advocates for your platform. Really then are the beginnings of what like drives brand loyalty, brand recognition for your particular company or project. So I think, yeah, it's really about what you're trying to achieve, figuring out how best you can achieve it, and then creating like a fully fledged strategy against that.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of that. I think like everyone's strategy should be bespoke to the company goals and KPIs, so that makes a lot of sense. So ultimately your marketing strategy is kind of different based on stage, category, what you're doing, what your KPIs are, etc. But what sort of like Web 2 marketing strategy should we actually bring across to Web 3, and like fundamental marketing should we bring across? I mean, Indi, you mentioned obviously Monzo. I'd love for you to take that question. We'll start with that question.
I think a big thing that we've brought across, I think Web 2 companies, depending on whatever definition we're going with, do personalization incredibly well. They're really good custodians of data from a marketing perspective, and they're good at leveraging that data to serve personalized user experiences. And often I find smaller companies can do that really quickly, and blockchain.com taken a lot of that from Monzo and from smaller fintechs I've been at, where we take user data to serve good experiences to them, both from a marketing perspective, but inside the product. So blockchain.com does a lot on CRM activation, so emails, pushes, and in-app messages. Price alerts are a big thing in centralized exchanges, but being able to serve the right price alert to the right user at the right time to generate the KPIs that we talked about, so engaging users. I think that's my favorite thing to have brought across.
Yeah.
I think like, for a lot of people as well that are maybe in projects that are more on-chain, right? Probably sitting thinking, well, my users have an allergic reaction to the idea that their data is being stored by me. And actually, I don't even know how the hell I'm going to go and email most of these anonymous, like hashed wallet addresses. I think that's a huge challenge, right? Like centralized exchanges have, to a certain degree, the benefit of the fact that people have to go through KYC, right? We have to verify someone is there is a liveness check. This, for the lion's share, should be real people, and that's really challenging. Then you have on the on-chain side, just a ton of, anonymous wallets, and most of which, or at least a big chunk of them, you have to assume are bots as well, whether they're trading bots or just spam. So it's like really hard to siphon through a lot of this. And like the kind of last point I'll just make on this piece really is, when you kind of think about these two things together, it's like, what are the kind of things that you can pull over from Web 2 and Web 3? For a lot of companies looking to build in the space, whether it's DeFi or whether it's more like the TradFi rails bringing people in. For a lot of projects, there isn't a whole lot of kind of like effective demand out there. Most of it's latent. By that, I'm kind of saying, right, the majority of the demand that people could potentially have into your product, they either don't really understand that they need it, nor do they understand the technology or the reasons why, or there's a big technological, price, like geographic, licensing barrier to them even coming on board. So it's whether you're going to shift more towards, hey, do I actually just need to be talking about why crypto or why this specific technological category versus why my project? I think that's like an area where a ton of wastage can happen as well.
I'd love to add on to this, because I think tracking the user funnel and connecting Web 2 and Web 3 data is so powerful. And coming from the agency side and working with a lot of brands and projects and protocols that are really pro-decentralization, we've had to meet them in the middle of, sometimes they don't want to use Google Analytics or Amplitude or Apps Flyer, and these are tracking tools from the Web 2 world that could be really effective. And we'll try to settle in the middle of Matimo or PostHog, something that is more open source. The way we've mapped things out at Hype, and it varies, it's very bespoke, but you can track a lot of early funnel metrics with Web 2 native data. That could include social, that can include website views. Then you can actually track on-chain metrics, and you can connect all of this together. We used to use Tableau for this before Cookie 3, Safari, and some of these attribution tools have came out. And then one more thing I want to add on is about fundamental marketing. I think something that is so important in the space outside of the data tracking is positioning. And that is something that we always want to start with our clients. What is your market positioning? That will never change, but where it's difficult in Web3 is the space is so competitive. A lot of it is shipping constantly new features to a very small audience. So you need to have a very clear scope of where you are relative to your competitors. And I have noticed the positioning cycles change a lot faster, even than in early stage tech outside of crypto.
Yeah, I think everything you guys have just spoken about there takes time to do, you know, and I think that is one thing that people don't feel like they have a lot of in Web3. For exactly as you said, it's like, okay, if we change this feature slightly, we might get 10 more users, and we change that feature slightly, we might get 10 more, you know, like that happens a lot, and I think that some things that the biggest and best brands do, like I was on a panel here yesterday with James from Coca-Cola, that's a 138-year-old brand, like they do innovative marketing strategies. At the end of the day, it's a fizzy drink, right? And it's just remained relevant from using the right strategies, the right technology at the right time, but being careful and considered about when they do it. And maybe that is something that we try and do, is just like commit to a plan. A lot of what we have to do at Alchemy is just tell people about the infrastructure that supports the real-time buying and selling of ads. Like that is, I don't think it's dry, but can be quite dry and wordy, but just educating. The first step really is like, what is it that you do? And you just need to tell people what you do over and over and over and over again. And then when you feel like you're bored of saying it, they've probably like, oh, I kind of get it now, you know? And I think that takes time. So like patience is really key. I think that is what big brands do well, is they're patient, the successful ones anyway. And I think that is something that Web3 in general could do a better job of, is just being a little bit more patient. Now I understand there's some external factors, but patience is key.
No, I think all really good takeaways, and definitely brand building does take time, and also consistency, like just being consistent with your messaging and consistent with how you're messaging, what your tone of voice is, etc. I think, on that point, so if you're building a brand, how much should you focus on like guerrilla marketing or like hype or token launches versus actually just community building? I mean, do you want to take that one?
I will, and then I'm sure Emily's going to have a load to say on this. So my first piece around this more specifically, and I don't want to keep like banging the desk about this, but understanding whether you're at or on the road to product market fit is incredibly important before you start throwing a ton of dollars at the wall, right? And I think like building a community, irrespective, is a pathway and a gateway to helping unlock and understand that. Building a load of hype, right? It's kind of like kickstarting the engine. You still got to put it in gear, still got to accelerate, and more importantly, you need to know how to drive, right? You don't have those loud pieces. You kind of just got a motor running right now, and it's just burning fuel. So I think thinking about this before you're diving in, people look at like some of the bigger brands that do huge activations, events in Web3, right? Let's take like Yuga as a great example of this, probably the poster child for this. And then you look at the likes of us, right? On the centralized exchange side of things, Formula One sponsorships, like sponsoring football teams. This is about like, how do we increase our TAM and reach? But we have very clear product market fit. So it makes sense to do a lot of this stuff. I know, Emily, you'll be like ready to talk about like the mechanics. I think you're better placed to.
I was telling Matt right before this, sometimes I really miss and I'm jealous that they have a measurable CAC and LTV.
Be careful what you wish for.
At Hype, we've done a lot of TGE, mainnet, devnet type of marketing, testnet marketing, and I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll keep it short and simple. Ultimately, what you said, actually, I'll echo, like finding your 100 first super fans. And it does take capital and patience as well, which I don't think it's a secret out here, but some of these projects don't get a lot of pressure and they don't have that time. But the more you can talk to your users, which is why you are seeing tactically a lot of founders connecting on X, connecting on socials, humanizing the brand to build that community and build that audience. that is a tactic to lead up to TGE event. So I think it's not one or the other. I think community is part of TGE. And granted, you will see a lot of mercenary capital with some of these campaigns. But the way you do strategy and the way you think about it is really how do we build a product people want to use? And that comes from the comm strategy, selling the purpose, and making sure you're talking to real potential users.
How do you unravel those, though? Like the TGE piece, where it's just like, when am I going to get a token to dump? And building an actual community. Because it's like the struggle is real. Like you go into most Discord channels and it's kind of like, the lunatics are running the asylum sometimes in there. And it gets really difficult to figure out who is actually the user of this and who is waiting for the TGE exclusively.
Yeah.
What I think has come out of that as well is like ultimately if you're a big brand, guerrilla marketing and actually like building hype makes a lot of sense ultimately because you just want to grow.
Yeah.
If you're a smaller company, like really you just want to find product market fit and find your initial users, which means like community is really at the heart. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. I'm very passionate about community building and really think like community is peer-to-peer knowledge exchange or like actually when you add value to people and then they give back. I think I'd love to understand like perhaps examples of communities that you've built or how you engaged your initial sort of 100 users as such and maybe some tactics that the audience could use.
I think one thing I've done at previous firms is we focused hyper-local. So we decided we wanted to get every developer in Shoreditch to use our product. And instead of looking at a really big area, we're like, okay, where do these people hang out? What are they doing? How do we make sure we're in their pocket? And then we kind of like rolled that out bigger and bigger and you build a little wheel that way. One thing you did talk about is when you're a bigger brand and you have a bit more money and you can track things, you can do these guerrilla activities. I have found in this space, blockchain.com is working very closely with regulators a lot of the time. I come up with what I think are fantastic guerrilla marketing campaigns that are really low cost and the compliance team are like, we are in talks with the French regulators. Please don't go and do that in Paris. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this would be really good. And I think there's a balance that way that I'm not sure how much you guys touch on it, but keeping the compliance team happy and doing, I think if you're maybe a smaller company or in a slightly different area of Web3, you have more of a luxury to do.
I think if the compliance team aren't sweating, you're not doing your job, right? I think that's like the general state that we live in.
Yeah, our general counsel's in the audience, and be careful what I say. I think I'll speak just to Alchemy. I think the hook we had is that everyone that ever came across us has been on the internet and seen an ad. So like there was some exposure to a degree, and then there are similarities between the way in which they might buy and sell crypto on Kraken to the way in which that we buy and sell ads to people, right? So like trying to draw parallels from what people understood and then just explain it in a similar way so they understand what exactly that we do and the problems that we're solving. And that has been, we've been doing that for 3.5 years. And there's now, quite proud to say, like the conversations that you see in our Telegram and our Discord are around people understanding how it's not good that Google have been doing what they've been doing, and it's why they're in trouble that they're in court, and it's why decentralizing digital advertising will allow for more transparency to allow people, like Kraken's a good example, to get more value from the media they buy online, or publishers can generate more revenue. And then that has just really just been patience and saying the same thing all over again, getting people that do it day to day. Like we had a podcast that used to have tens of listeners, and I'm glad to say it's slightly more than that now. So I'm not just talking to myself, but people that have that challenge spoke to us about it, grounds it in like, okay, that's a brand I recognize, they have that problem, I understand something already. It kind of adds that color to how they understand it, and that is just, we'll continue doing it every day, but has been a slow process. But I think, you've got to do it.
I think that's great. When you bring together people over like a mutual passion or something that they actually care about, then you start sort of having something in common and you can kind of go from there. I think one of the wonderful things about like blockchain technology or like even DAOs, as much as, do they work, do they not, this conversation continues, but Web3 thinks about governance more than Web2 does or anyone else does. And so like from an incentive side or like the tokenomics piece, I think we need to pull that in. Like what do you think about like incentives in Web3? Emily, I'm looking at you because I can imagine clients come to you with that question. So. Yeah.
This is related to the question we just went over, right? And I wanted to actually riff off what you said of community is when people are co-creating and contributing.
Yeah.
And it could be contributing through referrals, talking about it with friends, or adding to the purpose and spreading the purpose.
Yeah.
But that does come from having a very clear positioning of why should your brand or project exist, and ensuring that these people that you're finding are co-creating and co-building it with you. Specifically on how you differentiate community versus mercenary capital, I definitely think my answer right now is it's changing, because Uniswap had I think they kind of set the stage for airdrops that
Yeah.
no one expected it. It was a surprise. And 3 years later, people are purposely doing things for a set incentive versus doing things because it's fun, because they love the brand, or because they love the community. So when you're thinking about community, you need to think about the values that you want to instill. And that's where you make that differentiation between gamification and incentive structures.
And I think like there was a few things that have been like talked about. I think you mentioned about, you're going to focus hyper-local on 100 developers in Shoreditch. I think in crypto, one thing that's always interesting that when you look at pretty much any company that's building an audience in the space and ultimately trying to build a community, nearly every business in crypto is a marketplace business, whether that be about the supply and demand of driving liquidity into a lending protocol, whether that be a consumer gaming app where you need like player liquidity for other players to come in and also experience that with them, whether it be online social where you need users on one side that are posting and sharing content to consuming the content. Everything is a marketplace. And when you look at like the community side of things and how incentives wrap into this, you got to think about, okay, like what is it that gets this kind of like flywheel going for either boosting the demand on one side or the other to effectively get these growing in a nice balance. And you start with like this small tribe, right? And you build out to like the village, to the town, to the city, and eventually, you're an entire kind of country size. Not many projects are at that level. But incentives play a really important short-term role. And they can take you from the tribe to the town. But you've got to understand that when the incentives are gone, it is very quickly for, there to be everything go up in flames after that. This is a kickstart for something. You need people to come in and start lending on your protocol. Well, you need there to be liquidity on there to do that. Can you incentivize that to kickstart it, drive enough so that people are building a habit and getting to use the product on the demand side of this? And then eventually, you have enough people that are lending. It means more people are going to want to come in and supply capital on the other side, and this kind of takes over until you reach escape velocity. It's a delicate balance, but the incentives are not going to drive you to product market fit. It's, that needs to be there in the beginning.
Yeah.
Was there anything else anyone wants to add to that? No. In that case, I guess we've sort of spoken about, so we spoke about fundamentals from Web 2 that we can bring into Web 3. But obviously we can't ignore the fact that like people in Web3 just hang out in different like forums and spaces, whether that like be Telegram or Discord, etc. So, I mean, I'd love to sort of ask the question: what are the different ways to actually reach Web3 users and those first 100 users, or how can you get your brand out there in the right places to the right people? Wallet addresses. I know, Ben, you on the prep call, you were keen to also, this is an area that you wanted to...
Yeah, I think there's, identifiers have been great for marketers. So like you had cookies, still have cookies, you had device IDs for a long time, and now you have this new one, which is a wallet. And there's some really great companies, I think you mentioned them, Cookie3 and Safari, that's like, in my mind, it feels like the beginnings of when the internet kicked off and you had like Google Analytics that came to you and said, do you want to understand the people that have been on your website? You're like, yeah, I do. And then like, how do you want to start monetizing that audience? Or how do you want to find that audience elsewhere on the web? And I think that is something that will certainly become very interesting. Now, there is challenges. Are those wallets real? Is someone going to use a wallet that has valuable information in it? If it's like you're looking for people with a lot of crypto, like someone that could be high value to you. So there's certainly challenges with actually how operationally that would roll out. But to me, it like kind of rhymes with internet, well, desktop computers and then mobile devices, and now you have like this crypto wallet that's a really cool identifier that as soon as it becomes more ubiquitous, almost certainly will be used, in my opinion, as the new identifier online to help you find the beginnings of your audience or find your audience at scale or move your audience through a funnel, like that. To me, I don't see anything else. And I mean, in ad tech, this is a big deal. Like cookies have been talked about disappearing for a long time, and this is a $600 billion industry that bases a ton of what it does on, do we know the last websites that you went on in the last 30 days, or do we think that you are a male that lives in North London and might be interested in Adidas, like that underpins a lot of the way that brands, media agencies report back to them in terms of the performance of particular ad campaigns and KPIs they're looking for, like underpins what happens online. And this, to me, like a wallet as an ID is a really nice B2C metric that has a unique identifier that can be used by businesses at scale to find new audiences. So that is one thing that kind of happened by accident, I guess, but will be a big use case as it becomes more ubiquitous.
I will say for channels, specifically with the projects we work with right now, so this year we've done a lot of restaking protocols, DeFi protocols. The main forum, I would still say, is X. This can change at any time. There are some sub-channels, so very similar to Web2 marketing. I did a lot of performance ads. Usually you start with one main channel, you get to a certain CPA, it stabilizes, and then you put experimental budget on other channels. So with the current projects we work on, and what I define as Web3 or crypto native, X would be the main audience or the main channel, and then you can test things on Farcaster, on Lens, on Reddit. Yeah. There's also a new tactic I'm seeing of short form videos on TikTok, Instagram. There's also some SocialFi apps, but that's currently what I'm seeing right now. It could change. So it does come down to channel distribution, and what you decide as channels is part of your marketing strategy. And I think it echoes what everyone here was saying of positioning, KPIs, and then think about where your audience is.
And I imagine you do quite a lot on the partnership side as well. Like, I think about restaking, especially Web3 and crypto, composability is pretty much like the number one thing that gets touted across everything in crypto. If you're trying to tap in and go through the cold start problem of building an audience, the most friction-free, logical first place is to tap into an existing audience through simple partnerships. And I think you look at, especially in DeFi, this is great because say you're launching like there has been a lot of like a wrapped BTC competitor, right? Like you can go in and build a derivative of that with like restaking protocols, and you're effectively funneling incentives to other partners versus users, but now able to tap in and do co-marketing. This is like compounding effect that gets people through the door.
Yeah, I can see you nodding.
I'm just agreeing. Partnerships have been a huge addition for us. There's one thing I'm a little bit unsure of is if you go and partner with other DeFi protocols, do you bounce around like the crypto space? Like everyone here is excited to hear what you're talking about. I spend a lot of time thinking about, it's really easy to tell people who are already in this space what we're doing and find they're excited, but how do you bring that further out?
Yeah. I think that's like building the tribe, and I think it is the TAM for that kind of part of your stage is actually pretty small. Like it's easy to forget when you're working so in the weeds of this space for so long, the TAM is still very, very small. It's very small. It's expanded quite substantially, especially on the institutional side through this past year, but it is still very small. And I think if you want to kind of like build the nucleus and get from that cold start 0 to 1, that is the best, at least in my opinion, best starting point, and you combining all those channels. Is that going to be what gets you to like escape velocity? No way. Like, the TAM has to grow with you. You start building, and obviously that sometimes means alienating that initial tribe, but you grow from there.
Yeah. I love that. It's like as a group, we're marketing the industry and the space, and we can compete down here.
And then bring people in. Yeah. I think at this point, I really want to open up questions to the audience and incorporate, if anyone has any questions to actually ask, here's your time. Anyone? If not, I can ask another question. Yes.
I have one question. So I'm building a product that targets web customers.
Oh, sorry, we're going to wait for a mic. Here we go.
Hi, yeah. Thanks for the panel. This was really informative. So the question I have is really, I'm building a Web3 product for Web2 customers.
Yeah.
And then the challenge is that when I'm trying to explain what I built for Web3, it's like, got it, buying it. For Web2 users, it's like, do you have like 1 hour to sit in me in the room and like spend it on 1 hour with me, and I will explain things to you, and then maybe you'll get it?
Yeah.
How do you get around that? Because obviously Web2 market is way, way bigger than Web3. I didn't want to build for Web3 because it's just like small market, but go to Web2 seems like super challenging.
Yeah.
What's your just like maybe insights on that? Is it too early for that right now, or like what's the way to go?
Can you hit us with your elevator pitch?
So elevator pitch is, I'm a wrapper around DeFi protocols. So I'm using a business savings account. We're using your pounds directly. So it's like neobanks, but the yield is like your LP on DEX. And I'm just sucking the DEX for you. That's what I do.
That's cool. I think it kind of comes back to like jobs to be done, right? Like these are two distinct audiences at very different stages in like the consideration process. The Web3 customers are going to be like, you know, I get it. It's like on-chain savings account, like 100%. You don't need to go into like all the crazy detail. I actually care way more about like the efficiency of this, maybe fee structure, how it integrates with like some of the other stuff that we're doing on-chain. I imagine for the Web2, like, or like traditional businesses, they're like, how do I on-ramp and off-ramp? How do I like turn, like, what's the catch here? What's the security risks, which come up probably like endlessly, and you have to get into the details of like explaining blockchain technology versus your technology. And I think this kind of comes into, I think one of the things I mentioned really early on is like, at this stage, for some of your customers, are you selling your product right now, or are you selling crypto, right? And I think it's like bringing people on that journey and just accepting that like, there is going to be a much longer like sales gestation period of bringing those users down. Arguably, when you do get them to take that step, go through all that friction, that learning curve, you would hope that the retention of those users would be way stronger than the Web3 users that are much more happy to go and compete with, like, and jump to other competitors. So it's probably a balancing act, but
yeah. I'd also say, like, you explained how it does it, right? But like, what problem do you solve? Like,
Exactly,
what are you gonna do? Like, so I talk to media agencies and brands about this all day, every day. They couldn't give a shit that it's built on a blockchain, right? Because that's not, it's like 1% of what they think about at home on their own. What they care about is driving more value for their brands they work with, being able to see the performance, and making their media buying more efficient, pardon me. Like, at no point, now that is facilitated by a blockchain, but you don't need to say, I've done this, it's built on a blockchain, because like, and I get it, I love blockchains, it's super cool that we get to build on a technology that is really innovative, but you need to be saying to these people, here's the problems I solve for you, it's super easy, you make more money if you use this product. Like, that is a cool product, you know, not how it works, no one cares, right? Which, not to trivialize it, but literally no one cares about that. It's just like, what does it do for me? People are quite selfish. How can I use it day to day? How can it make my job easier to do? Yeah. And the technology just does what it needs to do in the background.
A simple framework I have for this, to echo and simplify, is the why, how, what. Most people don't really care about the what or the how it works. It's truly why. Like, why does this benefit me? Why should this exist in my life? So if you can nail that positioning and repeat it over and over again in different forms, you can do like long form storytelling as they're further down the funnel to educate them on crypto, but you need to start with the why.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with those points more, actually. You can't get someone excited who doesn't understand what they're doing, and it's, you know, it's a steep learning curve as Web3 and crypto. So you get them excited by what the problem you're solving. But I mean, we're actually out of time, unfortunately. But Indi, I'm going to just say one last thing. If there was, in the next 5 years, what do you think, how do you think marketing in Web3 is going to change 5 to 10 years? And then we'll
on the spot.
I know.
Yeah.
And what the Bitcoin price
I can talk about one thing I'm really excited about, and I look a lot to. I think the overlap in between Web3 strategies and kind of the gambling industry is something I find incredibly interesting, especially if we're working on an exchange. There's a lot of similarities, and I want to steal some of those strategies, see what applies, see what I can pull over. So that's probably what I'm most excited for.
Amazing. Good. Please may I have a round of applause for the panel.